My name is Beth Lancaster, and I work in the IT security office at Virginia Tech. And let me stop right there and say I also have a lot of allergy right now, so you may hear me cough or what have you, and I apologize. But prior to working in the IT security office, I worked as a Unix, Linux systems administrator. And Jeff mentioned earlier we get to take a SANS class every spring, and that's a real bonus. When I'm not at work, I like to travel, and I especially like bird watching, which I think balances out sitting at a computer, hunched over a keyboard, go outside, look up, and it's a nice balance. So the topic is multitasking, host forensics, specifically how the Virginia Tech IT security office does that. We have, as some of you may know, 4 security analysts, 2 who are on site here in Blacksburg, Virginia, and then 2 who telework. Jeff Lang is one of those 2. Our main campus is up in Blacksburg, and we have a very large geographic footprint, meaning there's times need to drive several miles to the location should we decide to go pick up a resource that we think we need to investigate further. We also, because we're a land-grant university, we have locations throughout the state of Virginia, including 3 up in what we refer to as the Capital Region. That's up in Northern Virginia, up near DC. This talk was put together and submitted for the NOVA B-Sides, and I aimed it for a beginner to intermediate audience, and with a specific focus on multitasking. We talk about how we do things and strive to do them in a very forensically sound way. Going to talk about the artifacts that we're looking for when we're doing the forensics, some things that we do in advance so that when we make that call to take in a resource and look deeper, we've got the hardware and the software tools that we need. And I'll talk about how we do our imaging and then also our analysis. For multitasking, host forensics, as you may know, is very, very time consuming. And so we try to use automated tools whenever possible. And we also try to do things simultaneously. So if we make that decision, like, okay, something looks very weird, probably before I'm even in the vehicle or heading over, Jeff is already pulling network logs and seeing what he can see on that side. We divide the forensics task up between multiple people or multiple computers. When we talk about forensically sound, we always operate from the standpoint that this could possibly end up in court. So we maintain a chain of custody. So we document when we take in a physical resource, and then we also document on another sheet of paper when we do an image. We create an image of the drive or the data source without altering the contents of the drive or data source. So we have to mount read-only. That's much easier to do in Linux. Windows, you're going to need a write blocker. And we have various ways that we do the imaging. So we like to document what hardware, what tools that we used in case we need to demonstrate to someone how we did that. And also we record the MD5 hash of the image, meaning if I was to make an image, record that MD5, and then later Jeff was in town, he took an image, we should end up with the same MD5 hash. A little bit about the Virginia Tech computing environment. We have a diversity of devices. Our office only does forensics for university-owned devices. We have authority to do that, but we do not do anything with employees or I think it's over 9,000 on-campus residential students. We are part of what's referred to as the Division of Information Technology here at Virginia Tech. And we might be a little bit unique since we're so large. We also have a networking group underneath the information technology group, and they're responsible for both the phones, the wired network, and the wireless network here at Tech. In some places, the Division of Information Technology may be overarching for the entire entity. That's not true here at Virginia Tech. And so we have many, many departments, and we refer to them as distributed or departmental IT support. And they have a fair degree of autonomy, as you can imagine. Some groups run a very, very tight ship. And then there's others on the other side that might be very, very loose. And then, of course, many in between. You also run into situations where an area may be without an IT person. They've had trouble hiring, or someone's out for an extended period for some type of leave. Everyone at Tech in the IT security or in the IT area, we are bounded by some policies and some standards. So departmental IT as well as the information technology area. The one sort of unusual thing about Virginia Tech is that we do not have a border firewall. That leaves some vendors rather surprised, and it's just a great way to live. It always adds excitement.
Yeah, there's nothing better than a vendor talking to us and asking us, or us asking them why they don't have a firewall on their system because it's going to be on the internet as a live IP, and they're like, "What? I don't understand that."
The nudists say the same thing.
So, yeah, just a good point to remember as we move along here. So the IT security office here, we have several resources that we use to monitor, to try to detect malware. And so we are looking for malware, signs of compromise with our sensors. So we have some FireEyes, we have some Palo Altos, we use Zeek. We have an elk stack that a lot of the network folks under the Division of IT, they put a lot of their logs and what have you into this elk stack, and our group has visibility into that. We also have BigFix, which we occasionally will use, but we only have the patch portion of BigFix. But that's been something that's helped us when we're looking for, say, some really weird malware that we're highly concerned about. We have a really good BigFix team, and I think there was one occasion where we did a search for an MD5. We really overtaxed that system, but it's a great stopgap. So when we say host artifacts, what are we looking for? Memory dumps. Password hashes are really high on our list. If someone has a system with a really, really weak password, then okay, game over. If you crack that password, then your time investment, you're done. Network logs, again, Jeff Lang is the man for that. AV, occasionally we will see malware, and then in the malware log, or in the AV log rather, we'll see that that the AV actually did catch something. Personally identified fileable information. So if we bring in a resource, we do what we call a PII scan. We use a Spirion, and the reason this office exists, one of the reasons, is to protect the PII of university people, and that's current faculty, staff, and student, and also former students and employees. And of course, log files, local log files, any kind of logs that might be on a logging host. And of course, the file system. Taking a look at all of these things takes a lot of time. So for preparation, we've done quite a few things. We have a forensics workstation. It's a commercial big box, and we have Access FTK Forensics Toolkit. So that's the paid version of this. And that's a great resource to examine an image. We've recently bought Oxygen Forensics Detective for mobile devices. We've had to say no a time or two when the request came in, can you image a mobile device? But we're ready to do that now, and that's an area where we're going to do some learning and improve our skills. We also make use of open source and free tools. The SANS SIF box is just a great, very, very economical option. That's the SANS Investigative Toolkit. So this is, you get that on the USB with some of the SANS classes like 500 and 508. And we also have used for doing images Access FTK Imager that works on Windows, and that is also a free resource. For multitasking, we all run some flavor of Linux, the analyst here, and so adding a forensics tool to your workstation, especially like a password cracker, we get those hashes, you can start trying to crack them. If they crack in just like seconds, I mean, okay, you're done. We also have some imaging equipment, dedicated imaging equipment made by Tableau. We have some write blockers. We have a hard drive dock made by Anchor. We use external USB hard drives. We're starting to use those more, especially when the resource that we are bringing in to examine, if you will, is a VM. This is a photo of the Anchor, and I can't say enough about how much we use this. That's the small form factor drive, but it also takes the little bit larger, or the large full size drive. But that's they have USB 3, and it just adds a lot of flexibility to the things we do. We also have had some success doing memory dumps. We've used WinPMem in the past, and most recently we've experimented with Live KD, and we're still learning with that. And for memory analysis, we've used Redline, Recall, and Volatility. Again, those are things that you can have on your workstation in advance of an incident. So for password cracking, we've played a little bit with Hashcat. The advantage with that is that it's very, very fast. It's GPU based. I'm very partial to John the Ripper, and I get the John the Ripper Jumbo. That's the community enhanced version, and that includes a lot of support for just additional hashes. So once you get it compiled on your box, it works very, very well. I like to have what I call a go bag or a jump bag ready. So we have that external USB hard drive with memory dumping tools. So any kind of scripts or anything that I might need ready to go. We have our chain of custody forms and of course a pen, still operating on paper. And I like to take a notebook. A lot of people are like, I'm going to use my phone or I'm going to use something else. I'm still okay with using a notebook. We have rock-clad buildings, and so you're not always going to be guaranteed to get a signal. Cheat sheets. So any utility that I have on the external hard drive, I like to take like the usage. I don't want to show up and not be able to use a tool that I've brought. And then also, Virginia Tech has such a diverse learning environment here. You'll show up in someone's office and you're talking about malware or there's a suspected hacking situation. And they're really excited because they see stuff on Facebook or on the news but here we are in their office. We're, looking at their computer. So they're going to ask a million questions. So it's always good to know exactly what you're going to do with the tool. And last but not least, I'll take a checklist. And this is kind of a post-it note. And usually when I step out of the office to go collect the resource, there's like 3 to 5 things. Like Jeff may have already turned up something in the network log or there's something about the alert. And so we always say, well, is this the expected behavior? Do you know, it's just a little quick. We're going to go ask them a few questions while everything is still fresh on their minds. So at this point, we're ready. But I think it's important to remember a few things. The criteria for imaging a host. And again, it's so time consuming that it's important that you don't just bog yourself down making images all the time and then having to look them over. So each incident is unique, and it's important just to remember that you may think, okay, this is going to be just like whatever happened last week, but often it's not. They're always a learning opportunity and really also an education opportunity when you go out and you're meeting with folks. And our process is ever evolving and being refined. And one thing that we have that makes a tremendous difference is that we have management approval and support. So if we give our boss a reason as to why we went out to bring in a resource for further investigation, he has our back. And we do not take advantage of that fact. So that's very, very important, and it works very well for us. So this is an example of an incident that we had. It's back in the cold weather. We received numerous reports of a host that was attacking hosts around the world. So we made the call. We need to go visit them. So again, so I'm like trying to call to see where it is, to locate it, to find the responsible party. We're very big, so I've got to go pick it up. And this particular situation, it was in a building that had some controlled access. So even if I'd gone over there, if I'd not made arrangements in advance, I might not have gotten to where this resource was. And then our teleworking folks, Jeff and Shane, were already looking at the sensors, running nmaps, vulnerability scans, pulling the network logs. When we show up, ideal, it used to be especially, was to get a memory dump. Windows 10 has much better memory protection. So at the moment, we're still trying to get memory dumps, but we may not be getting as much intel out of those. We use WinPMEM to do that. And again, once we get them, the analysis can take a good bit of time, but we have turned up some pretty good stuff. In fact, here's an example. Jeff had seen something curious on port 1024. And so we got a memory dump, and this was an older system. And so with volatility, it took me, this was an incident where I explored and learned quite a bit about volatility. But one of the first plugins to run is Image Info. And this is what it told me on the real. This was from a real situation. And so here we are. So its guess here was that it was a Windows 2008. So I ran volatility, gave it the profile, and it took a long time to get to this point, but we find with NetScan right there, it was listening on 1024. And if you notice over on the right side of the screen, it's got VMC host.exe. So that was, in fact, the piece of malware. So with that, I was able to get that piece of malware off the image. I got the MD5 hash. You can also submit the actual file to VirusTotal to try to learn more. We could, Shane especially here has done one of the SANS malware classes. We could search BigFix for that MD5 hash if we thought this was a more widespread situation. And in the previous screen, it shows you the parent process number, so we could investigate further there. Pardon me. Here's some other plugins that we ran on that memory dump, and so it was off of 2008, and so it did show us the tools worked very well on that. So we looked at that some, and then there's also hash dump, which is a plugin that worked very well, and so we could get the hashes right there. And I think either Ginger or Frank had a blank password, which is always a clue that there was a problem. So we focus on those a little bit more than maybe some areas. We have Brad Tilley here, who is sort of well known as a person that can crack passwords. He's won some competitions or placed very high. So it is the frequent way a host is compromised. It's a quick answer. We mount the drive. Sometimes before we even do an image, we mount the drive read-only and pull the hashes and start John the Ripper up on those hashes. And here's an example of some of the things we've recovered from the real Virginia Tech world. When this passed, the computer that was attacking computers all around the world had training and training. Yeah.
Sophisticated.
And he didn't tell me. And he thought he was quite the IT person. But for a long time, Leo was our winner for shortest username and shortest password. But then this summer, we had a new winner. Up and up. Yeah. It was awesome. So this is a little bit more about that guy. He had training. He had it was a VM. He had SSH open. And then he thought, well, it'd be so convenient for me to forward the VM port 22 over to the host port 222. Oh, wait, we don't have a border firewall. And I actually took a picture of what he did. He was trying to learn Puppet. And so it made it really easy for the hackers to break in. So we use, for Windows hashes, we use SAM dump 2. and we end up with something that looks sort of like this. That's something that you can point John the Ripper to and let it go. For Linux, John the Ripper includes a utility called Unshadow. And you turn up something that looks like this. For Macs, Macs are more difficult to get the hashes. From what I've experienced, it varies by OS. So what works maybe as far back as Yosemite or on Sierra or High Sierra is not going to work on Mojave. So you can get them, but it's much more, it's not easy. And there's a lot of blogs and sites out there that can give you the steps. So finally, we get ready to make the image. Just making that image can take quite a while, which is why we like to pull the password hashes as soon as we can. We, again, record the MD5 hash. We use our Tableau for physical drives. One of the neat things about it is that it has what I call form factor attachments. So we'll take a solid state drive out and we have a little attachment we can just slide it into, and that's worked well. There's also a FTK Imager, that's the free tool. And we pay for something called Macquisition, and that's worked really, really well for laptops and for iMacs, where we just don't want to take apart and potentially damage a machine just to get the image. So Macquisition, it's a USB, you boot to that, it does a forensics boot, and then you can make a copy off to an external USB hard drive. For sometimes the Tableau has a problem. It just doesn't see something or what have you. You can also use a Linux box with certain tools, or set up the CIF box and use the Anchor hard drive dock to pull the image. And then Kali Linux, you can do a forensics boot there, and that's very similar to the Macquisition on the Mac side. So if you have a really new Dell laptop or the all-in-ones, that's worth a try before you start taking things apart and end up possibly breaking something. And with the Kali, then you're just using the command line tools. There's DD and DC, FLDD. The Macquisition has this little cute GUI. Oh yeah, here's the sample command. So examining the image, we get the image. It's good. It can take a long, long time. So we try to break it up. Again, if we've not gotten the hashes, that's one of the top things that we do. Occasionally, like let's say we started making an image and we're like, this is going to be a big, big puzzle. Sometimes we'll go ahead and invest the time to make a second image so that we can have multiple machines examining things at the same time. So one thing that we'll do is just run AV, and every now and then, you know, just turn up and say, this is the piece of malware. A lot of times you run it, it turns up nothing. A day or two later, 3 days, you run it again, and boom, there's the piece of malware. For PII, we have purchased the product Spirion. It was formerly Identity Finder. It's maybe our least customer-friendly product, but it does a pretty good job. And there's also Find SSN. It's a very, very old utility that Brad Tilley wrote, but it actually runs most of the time on Macs. I haven't tried it on Mojave, but it works very well. And so, pardon me just a moment. the reason we're doing this is even though we have policies and standards that say you must store uh, personally identifiable information uh, encrypted at rest, it needs to be encrypted in transit, we still find PII. And one case that happened is there was a lady and she had fallen really hard for a phishing campaign. So we bring in her machine, I do an image and I scan it and I turn up a text file with a social security number. So we call her up and said, we found this. And she's like, yes, that is a social security number. Turned out it was her deceased father's social security number. He had been an elderly gentleman before he passed away. And she had kept that social security number there available as she interacted with the VA and Medicare and Social Security. But she was still breaking policy. Had he not been deceased, we would have been required, her department would have been required to send a notification. The Access Forensics Toolkit, it's on, I call it the big box. So it's a big computer with several ways to attach drives and resources to it. And this is something you point it to an image and then you just walk away for several hours and it will sort of roll over that image. It'll pull out like chat, it'll pull out email, it'll try to pull out images. It'll just try to categorize the things that it finds. There's also Autopsy, which is part of the Sleuth Kit. That's also in SIFT, and that does, in some ways, a similar thing. It sets up a little web server so that you can look for artifacts. It's pretty handy and pretty easy to see deleted files with Autopsy. And you hope you never get to the point of doing file system, examining it by hand. But if you do, it really takes a lot of time. But I mentioned deleted files. We've used Scalpel to recover some files. That's another Linux utility, and it worked very, very well. For the logs, of course, there's the system logs, application logs, database logs, again, the AV. And we've been talking about different ways here, possibly taking compromised host logs and putting them into like a what we're going to maybe have a little local elk stack. We're still tossing that idea around, but if we could see those logs in contact, maybe with multiple hosts or with other events, we think that might help us piece together things more quickly. We've also done a timeline. FLS is part of Sleuth Kit, and then there's Log to Time. Log to Timeline, again, is something you start it up and it's going to run and run for a long time. And it will give you a CSV file that can be enormous. So you really need to grep through it and pull out stuff that you don't need. I did one time and it was so big that like Excel just fell over. It couldn't open it. It was just too big. There's my little point about that. But what you're looking for with these is the file times. So the modified time, the time the file was accessed, when it was created, and then the time when the metadata, so the modified, accessed, or created, what time that was changed. And SANS has a really great poster with a panel devoted to that. And you would have to do this every day, or if you were doing it, you need to find that poster. And I guess it's available on the SANS website, and it can tell you if accessed and modified changed, then this could mean one thing. And so it's very, very helpful. There's also, sometimes people forget, but for memory, if you're really stuck, you might find this hyberfill.sys on a laptop, and that can be converted with volatility into a memory file. And then some more advanced things are this application compatibility cache, SIM cache. I took 508 and did this in the class. I've not done that here yet because it's very often the passwords. And then there's also volume snapshot service or shadow copy. And we might start looking more into that now that the memory dumps have not been as fruitful. So in conclusion, it's anytime you're going to do post forensics, it's you need to remember it's going to be a tremendous investment of time and weigh that against the benefit and multitask when you can. We try to do things forensically sound, and so that's sort of what we do. So thank you very much, and I'm available for questions.
Yeah, I was curious. How do you determine, or what does it look like? So, let's say you go out to you retrieve an end user's workstation, and it's a university, computer. It could be a professor or a teacher or whoever. If the forensics is very time consuming, what is the end user's experience like? Are they without a computer for a week or a month, or do you give them a loaner in the meantime, or how does that affect your users?
So that could be what we try to do, a situation like that is talk. So the way, I guess what I left out is that networking group has a 2 people designated per area, and that's hard to define what an area is, but each computer has, we call them network liaisons. And so we contact those folks. And so they can give us like information like, okay, I really need that hard drive back very, very quickly, or it's okay, I can reimage and give the user another computer very quickly. So worst case scenario, we bring it in, we image it, and then once we're satisfied we got a clean image, then we just give them their hard drive right back.
Okay, and they just reimage Windows fresh and start over.
Right. And different departments have different levels of funding. Some areas, say like our library here has like a lot of people, a lot of computers, and probably computers that are kind of on the shelf. They haven't been sent to surplus, so they might be able to cycle in a loaner, if you will. Some other little tiny departments, or let's say it's a university-owned computer, but it's in a graduate student office and their only copy of their research is on that. We're going to work with them. We're going to give them some good advice, but we try to help them as much as we can.
So once you've gotten the image, you've done your analysis, what's your value add? Like, are you, obviously with a student laptop, you can do some user education. With a staff laptop or a computer, are you using your analysis to turn around and buff up productions, or what do you do with that information once you have it?
We try to educate folks. The gentleman that got hacked and was somewhat unaware that he was hacked, I think he might have learned his lesson, but when I first stepped into his office, he was very like, you can't even touch my keyboard, and just sort of spent a little time, talked to them a little bit, said, "Oh, so sorry, I can't see the screen from here. I need to sit in front of the computer." And, I knew that if I needed to, I could let Jeff know. And then our big boss could be the hammer, but we never really try to go that route, so to speak. We try to just work with people. And we've never had anybody refuse to give us their computer. We have these stickers that they put on Virginia Tech owned equipment, and when we point that out and say this belongs to Virginia Tech and we have authority, they back down really quickly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and the user training is really good, both within the department. Oftentimes, those departmental IT representatives actually didn't realize that their user was doing this. So, there's the end user education, there's the departmental education. A lot of what we're really looking for was the PII on the machine? If it was it handled correctly and encrypted? Because that becomes a fork in the process. If we have a PII on the machine and it's unencrypted and we know it's malware infected, we're looking for signs. Did it get exfiltrated? And so from there, that creates a whole different branch that we now have to get university legal involved. And we have some other things that we have to do as far as reporting purposes for both the Department of Education and for the Commonwealth of Virginia. So that's really kind of why we go through that process, is to ensure that we take the appropriate steps if there is PII on there.
For the seek logs that you collect into the LSAC, of those logs, because there's so many of them, what do you find most useful during your incident response process?
Can you repeat the first part of the question again?
So of the Zeek logs that you collect, what logs do you find most important? Because there's so many logs I've noticed, like the connection logs, the 509.
Yeah, the connection logs are super important because that's basically going to be the record of all traffic that happened. With a lot of malware, especially, you're going to start looking for HTTP and HTTPS traffic. If you can identify the website they went to and downloaded, those logs actually have a lot of information about the that connection. And if you see that there were files related to it, you can pivot into that file log. And we don't capture the actual files currently, but it does give an MD5 sum for what those files are. So we can kind of shortcut the process and say, hey, we have this hash. Let's put it in VirusTotal. Let's see what the world tells us about that hash. And then that can be something that goes on our checklist. So when we go out and it's like, hey, this is an adware or a grayware piece of software, we can talk to the user and say, hey, did you mean to install this password cracker? And they're like, yeah, I forgot the password on a file that I encrypted using Microsoft Office. And so, it kind of brings that back and forth. One of the ones that we've started looking at more now is the software log. And that's, it actually will capture version numbers for services that are on the machine. So if you're running a web server, you can go to the software log, and it'll usually tell you that it's a WordPress 5 versions out of being up to date and supported, or things along those lines. So those are really a lot of the files that we tend to look at.
So with the file log, do you have anything set up to automatically scan the file log and look for malicious hashes as suggested?
We are not doing that currently. And the reason that we're not doing it is mostly because we've got our FireEyes in play as well, and they're kind of doing that analysis for us. And so we use kind of the correlation between the two of them.
Okay.
We did get a chat question. Is there staff education / security education?
We hope. We have two, I guess, little conferences or on-campus little symposiums, and our department usually does a presentation. We have an open invitation to departments that we will come do awareness training, especially if there's an area that's had some issues. We very much offer that.
We use Securing the Human as well. That's a SANS product, but it's not a requirement in every department. So we make it available to people and highly encourage, especially in the aftermath of a malware infection or a phishing investigation that we're doing, that they do those sorts of things, but there's little that we can do to kind of enforce that.
Public shaming?
Yeah, we try not to do that.
Curious about this no firewall on the edge deal. It's a departure from what I'm used to. Do you feel that you're better off not having the firewall, or would you rather have one? And I noticed you said you were running a PA. Are y'all just using that as an IDS, IPS, or is there other function there?
So the Palo Alto that we've got currently is sitting in line in our one kind of secure network. We call it restricted network. It's our restricted LAN. And we've got people from the bursar's office, student services, controller's office, so our financial, and that's what you would expect to see. It's a slightly more corporate style network. So that's where the Palo Altos are, although we are interested in comparing the wildfire malware investigation component of the Palo Altos versus FireEye, because quite frankly, FireEye is getting really expensive, and their utility is maybe not enough to justify that cost in the long run. Do we think we would want a firewall at the edge? Yes, we would want a firewall at the edge. If nothing else, it would help us to respond in some incidents and some circumstances where we know things are going on. But as Randy Marchini, our boss, likes to say, security is local. So we highly encourage people to run their local firewalls, be it on Windows, Mac, or Linux. It's amazing the number of corporate places you go where they don't run internal host-based firewalls. So as soon as you crack the outer shell of that egg, they have unfettered access laterally. So on one hand, we get some protection from that. But on the other hand, everybody in China can do whatever they want.
Yeah, okay. It's your one chance to heckle Jeff, so heckle.
Until the next one.
Yeah.
So one thing I'll add is when we have the image and we scan it with AV, that can take a long time because we will do a full scan. So that's something that might run while we're doing other things. So multitasking, and then also with Spirion, depending on the size of the resource, it can run for many hours,
if not days.
Nobody's asleep, so I got one. You got one? Okay.
Hey, what are you using to manage your case, your incidents, document everything?
That is a good question. We're doing mostly freeform that we have in a wiki at this point, but we have started looking at some more formal methods to track these sorts of things. And we've taken a look at the security components for ServiceNow. The university is a ServiceNow customer, and we just had that conversation with them. But we also want to stand up a version of the Hive and see if we can leverage some of that to do all of our case management and especially to stay more organized and on track with some of our forensic stuff. If you have any suggestions of things that you use, we would love to hear it.
Pen and paper. Spreadsheets.
Where would you take your program next? What's your next step?
Can someone read us? There's a question in chat as well, so we'll do that in a second.
Okay.
Where would we want to take? What would you see as our next steps for the forensics portion, and what we could do better with?
I think our future is cloudy. So we don't know what's going to happen with different types of cloud type situations.
I hate this game.
We've already taken the one step, little step into being able to deal with mobile resources, or to try to be able to. And I mean, fortunately, we don't do this a tremendous amount. Now, I say that, and tomorrow things could blow up, but it seems to come in batches, if you will.
One thing I was just going to say one additional thing is, and I hope we can get to this point. I don't see any reason why we can't, but I would recommend this as something for other people if you're looking at doing, forensics response. Tabletop incidents where we kind of bake a situation and we go and work with a department and maybe get an image of a machine, and we go through the process, not as in a time crunch as much as we would do during an investigation, so that we can keep those skills kind of honed and ready for action, because you can go months with no investigation, and then you'll find that you're doing 3 at a time. And so it's good to have that as well. And Beth had mentioned one of the things about Windows 10 and memory protection. They keep changing their memory footprint every time they do a new release. So when you get, I don't even remember what they call them anymore, but the major dot releases that they do, they change a lot of memory image information. And we found in that investigation that the machine one of the machines had the latest version of Windows 10 that had just come out like 2 weeks before, and we had no way to do that because the tools had not been updated at that point. So that's one of those things that you have to challenge yourselves with as well.
See your question in chat, Jeff?
Josh sent it over, and what's the most sophisticated attack incident that we have encountered, and any other tidbits about it?
I'm thinking for a minute. Let's see.
Let me tell you, if you run Cold Fusion, stop. Probably 2 of the biggest ones we've dealt with have all come through Cold Fusion web servers being compromised, and then compromising a departmental domain. So be very careful.
I actually just had one of those 2 weeks ago. It sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing, and it's like, if you're going to have to run Cold Fusion, if you have to because you're supporting a legacy app, get it.
Google is.
Yeah. Do not have it in a domain.
Get it out of your domain and just run it as a standard standalone server, because otherwise you open up too many risks.
Yeah. So I would answer to your question, like with my Cold Fusion issue. It did Cold Fusion, it did SMTP, and it did other web IIS, and did I say CRM? Yeah, so it was their main CRM solution.
Nice.
Right, so all in one box. So 2008 R2 box.
Yep.
So the last time it was patched was November.
Well,
Right, so there were a couple opportunities.
Yeah.
And it was running Java 164.
Oh my God.
Wait, do you work at Virginia Tech?
No, sir.
He's one of your trolls that you have to deal with.
Yeah, no. But hey, I thought of an answer for you for case management.
Sure.
You guys, your relationship with your Palo folks, ask them to spring up like some XDR for you, and when Demisto comes in for them, and that might help you guys out, and it might give you some workflow and some case management.
Okay. I know they have a lot of tools that they offer on the side as well. We just haven't investigated that too much.
You were asking about sophisticated things. So we have Duo, and just 2 weeks ago, we had a very, very successful phishing attack, and they managed to get people to do their Duo, and then they added a few devices. So they added their own Duo device. So that was pretty clever.
It's a two-factor.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So basically, they were waiting for people they scraped our login page. They were waiting for people to put their credentials into it, and then they were immediately going through the enrollment step to add a new device. So if you get a new phone and you want to add it, you do the login procedure, but you say, instead of login, you say enroll a new device, and then it walks you through adding that. But you have to, of course, approve the two-factor first. So what they were actually doing is instead of logging in and trying to go change a password through like a standard password piece, they were adding their own device on top of the other devices that were there, so that they could then go in and select that alternate device when they wanted to log in with those credentials and not let the person know.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. So we're actually still working with Duo to see if they can make any modifications on their end to try and help catch that in the future. And we ended up being able to track that because those Duo enrollments were all coming from the same set of 4 IP addresses. One was in Washington, one was in California, one was in Johannesburg, and I forget where the other one was offhand. It was Johannesburg as well. And so we were able to start matching in multiple enrollments on users to IP address. And Beth had mentioned we use ELK. So we had built some visualizations in ELK to give us to break those down so we could immediately see what they were. And then we would go and report that account compromised and lock all of the stuff with it. So it was an interesting one.
What's your most common, since most of us have a firewall, we don't get to see this. What's your most common thing that you see?
As far as like scans or
things that you respond to or you have to respond to that need forensics.
So one thing we see, people run some type of Linux flavor, and they're like, I really want to connect to this from wherever. Or Windows, and so they just so we do have port 22, and we do have the
3389.
The RDP ports blocked at the edge, and that was a major wrangle to get that. So the local IT folks know this, so they'll just run RDP or SSH on another port.
Nice.
And then when we get the forensics image, I get a Slack from Beth. It says, I'm going to go start John the Ripper. And then 3 minutes comes back, I've got 6 passwords. That's generally what we see most of.
And 3 of them are change me.
It's the best password.
Yeah.
And then the others are like, up and up.
But I would say that bad local passwords are probably the biggest way that we're seeing people compromise a machine.
And predictive passwords. So we had one area that had a local Windows admin password, and it was like 3 letters, and then the year, and bang. And so then the next year, it was those same 3 letters, the next year, and bang. And they had done that. So that was not only the local password, but then, oh, you're new to the department, let us give you this temporary password, which was also the same thing. So, yeah.
Without being set to change password at next logon.
Nice.
And I guess graduate students being systems administrators that's a big potential for trouble, because they'll just add somebody else and they'll, like Elm Smith. Okay, now go change your password. Her person never changes their password.
Yeah, I intentionally make the temporary password extremely difficult so they're forced to change it. Don't hate me otherwise.
Here's your 22-character temporary password. Change it if you want.
Yeah.
Sounds like your future is required training.
So we've actually, in response to a lot of the phishing attacks, we're building a phishing awareness program that we are basically taking all of the actual phishing messages that we're getting and having to work with people and building that into that awareness training. And I think at that point, if we find somebody, we might have a good case to say, if somebody falls for a phish, they have to take this class. And if they fall for it again, they have to take the class again because they apparently weren't paying attention.
The third time, you just kick them off of the campus?
Yeah. Yeah, like defensive driving. If you get caught, speeding, then you have to go take the defensive driving class.
But we do have a lot of users that fortunately report phish and know about them. So it's amazing how many phishing emails we receive, and then how many people ignore or pass along to us. And we're trying to raise awareness about passwords and the need for better passwords.
Yeah. Isn't there a Have I Been Pwned has a plugin like for Active Directory or some kind of some authentication services have a plugin for Have I Been Pwned, so if you put in a password, it will go check their database and then come back and tell you if you typed in a password that matches anything on the database, it will prevent you from using that password.
Yes. We've also, they have those. For our Duo backed login, we actually just recently rolled out a Bloom filter that is searching the list of pretty much every password that we have ever seen get publicly released. And if that password has ever been publicly released, it is denied as an acceptable password on campus.
Nice.
So they did a lot of hard work getting that filter to be able to search, because you don't want it to take forever when you're trying to change your password, and you cannot tell that it's going on in the background, and it'll just say no, this, and it comes back with a message, I think, that says this password was publicly disclosed at some point in the recent past. You need to choose another one.
Yeah.
It's a binary search.
Yeah. I don't know.
Cool. If nobody else has any questions, I guess we'll wrap it up. Right. So
I hear that that there might be smoked chicken wings in your future, and I highly recommend it if that's the case.
Yeah. So what he's talking about is, you want to do your spiel? Usually one who talks about bar none, I guess.
Yeah, my buddy, he runs a little shindig called Smoky Logins, and he's gonna be at bar none tonight, smoking wings. So I don't know if you're going, Corey, but
Dipping out.
Generally, a bunch of us go down there, we'll after party, hang out, and get some smoked wings. So you're welcome to join.
It's a non-ColaSec event. Not that we're an actual organization. It's not funded. You get in trouble, it's your fault. There's no affiliation.
Yeah.
Well, Beth, thank you very much. Jeff, thank you for co-piloting. There is, I assume there's still pizza in the back. There's like a couple of slices, so it's either going home with somebody, i.e. not me, or somebody's about to eat it. So please eat it. Feel free to grab a drink too. If you're driving, you can't have a beer, so don't do that. Just saying. Just got to say it, right? Thanks everybody for coming. Beth, thanks again for presenting. Jeff, co-piloting.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk to you guys later.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm not going to play Where's the Mouse. This is my least favorite game.
Yeah, now I want that. Infinite loop.